Hello everyone and welcome to our lesson. I'm Mike Evans. Today we are going to learn about two types of questions in English, direct and indirect questions. Have you ever felt that a question sounds too abrupt or impolite? In English, we often choose the indirect way because to us English native speakers it sounds friendlier. So, sit back with your tea or coffee and let's begin. First, let's talk about direct questions. A direct question is simple and to the point. For example, imagine you are in a cafe and you ask, "What is the time?" This question is clear. We use a question word like what, when, or where to start the question. Then we use a special word order. This is called inversion. The verb comes before the subject. In the last question, the verb is, and the subject is the time. So we say, what is the time, and not what the time is. The verb comes first, straight after the question word, what. With other verbs, other than the verb be, which is where is comes from, we normally have to add an auxiliary verb when asking questions. It's this auxiliary verb which changes order, not the main verb. For example, where do you live? Notice how the auxiliary verb do comes before you in the question. This is how we normally form direct questions in English. Here are some more examples with auxiliary verbs. What time is the train due? Do you like tea? Did he finish on time? Would you like a cup of tea? Will he come later? Has he eaten his dinner? Direct questions are useful when you need a quick answer. However, sometimes they can be too plain or too sharp when talking to someone you don't know well. How can we ask questions in a more polite way? By using indirect questions. Indirect questions are, as you might guess, not as direct. They include a polite opening phrase before the real question we want to know the answer to. Instead of asking, "Where is the nearest metro station?" we can say, "Could you tell me where the nearest metro station is?" Notice the change. We add a polite phrase at the beginning and we do not invert the subject and verb in the part that comes after. And depending on the tense, we might no longer need an auxiliary verb. So, not could you tell me where is the nearest metro station? Here are some common phrases you can use to start an indirect question. Could you tell me? Could you tell me what time it is? Would you mind telling me? Would you mind telling me where you found that book? Do you know? Do you know if the shop is open? I was wondering. I was wondering where you live. May I ask? May I ask what your favorite film is? I'd like to know. I'd like to know why the meeting was postponed. Would you happen to know? Would you happen to know how to get to the station? When we use these polite phrases, the question becomes part of a longer sentence. For example, compare the direct version, what is the time? An indirect version, could you tell me what the time is? The second question sounds more friendly. In English, we want to be polite and we believe that indirect questions help us to sound more respectful and kind. For example, at work, when speaking to someone older, a direct question can seem a bit too harsh. Instead of saying, "When is the deadline?" you can say, "Could you tell me when the deadline is?" The listener feels more comfortable because you are not asking them directly. You give them a chance to answer without feeling forced. In fact, if you look at some of the opening phrases we use in indirect questions, it's almost like you are actually asking permission to ask the question. This is why many people in English-speaking countries choose indirect questions in formal situations. In fact, some English speakers believe, usually wrongly, that foreigners are being impolite simply because they start conversations with direct questions. Remember, using phrases like, "Could you tell me?" "I was wondering," and "Would you mind?" can make your questions sound more respectful and more polite. Let's quickly recap what we have learned. Direct questions are short and use inversion. For example, what is the time? Indirect questions start with a polite phrase and do not change the word order of the subject and verb. No inversion. For English speakers, you sound more kind and respectful. Now it's time for a short quiz. Quiz question 1. Transform this direct question into an indirect one. What's your favorite color? A good answer is, could you tell me what your favorite color is? Quiz question 2. Change this direct question. Where is the nearest post office? One answer can be, I was wondering where the nearest post office is. Great job. Keep practicing those structures and soon you will use them naturally in everyday conversations. As a final point, let me just point out that you don't have to use indirect questions all the time. It's normal that once you've started a conversation and asked one or perhaps two indirect questions, you will probably then revert to asking direct questions. So imagine a conversation where you stop a stranger to ask directions. Your first question is indirect. Could you tell me where the railway station is? When the stranger replies with some directions, you can ask for some clarification with a direct question. Is that next to the post office? You can then finish off with another direct question. How long will it take to walk there? Obviously, you will have to decide what is and isn't appropriate, depending on the situation. In fact, in a very formal situation, it might even be the case that many of your questions are indirect, not just the opening question. Have a great day and see you for the next lesson.